This is the second video about transforming basic vocabulary for IELTS into much better words that get you better vocabulary marks. There is a first video. If you haven't seen it, it's on my channel, so you can check that one out. I'm Will. I was an IELTS examiner for 5 years and I have over 30 years or so experience in teaching. So let's look at 5 more basic words to avoid. First one we're going to look at is say, very basic and general. Then there's make, then there's help, followed by problem. Stick with me to the end of this video and I'll show you this word, and it's a word that examiners find very annoying because students, particularly in the writing, use it far too often. I'll show you that near the end of the video. Until then, let's go. So there we have say 5 times. You could use if you want, but you're not going to get any marks. We look at 5 other words for this. So that's state, mention, claim, argue, and declare. Let's have a look at state first. Of course, they're all verbs. What is state? It's formal and clear when you say something, and this is the point. When you write an essay, for example, and you use the word state, you're making a formal, clear point. It's a very solid, strong point, and you're making it very clear. It's not as if you say, which is quite general. State, you're saying it as if it's solid. In speaking, the government clearly stated its position. So the government doesn't just say its position, they clearly state their position. That's it. And in writing, the report stated that global temperatures are rising. So the report clearly said it was global temperatures are rising and they don't want any arguments. But then we move to another verb, mention. So it means say, but it doesn't mean the same as state. It has a different meaning. So mention is when you say something briefly or you just make a casual reference. So that means it's not your main point. You're talking about something else and you just, oh, I forgot about this, and you say something quickly, like an extra piece of information almost. So you say it briefly. It's not state where it's your main point. For example, I mentioned this to my tutor last week. So I briefly told my tutor last week. And writing, the study mentioned several causes of stress, but it wasn't the main point. They did mention the reasons behind it, said it very quickly. So mention is very different from state, but they both mean say, because say is so general. Likewise, we have claim. So it does mean say, yes, but what kind of say does claim mean? When you say something that's quite general, if you say claim, use the verb to claim, well, that suggests that it's not completely, it may or may not be true. It may be that some people say the opposite and people argue about this. If someone claims something, maybe someone else will claim the opposite. It means it's possibly not true. This is different from state and mention. It's not solid like state, for example. In speaking, he claimed that he had done the homework. So obviously he said he did the homework, but did he? That's the idea. And writing, the company claimed that the product was safe. Well, the company makes the product, so of course they'll claim it's safe, but is it? And then we move on to argue, another verb. Of course, it means say, but it means a little different detail to the other verbs that we've looked at. There's different meanings of argue. Sometimes argue means when people get angry and almost fight, but it's not that kind of meaning. This one is a strong opinion with reason. So you've heard of argumentative essays, possibly. So that doesn't mean you write an essay because you want to fight somebody. It's because you're stating a strong opinion with reason. What's your argument? Well, you have to say your strong opinion, but this time, unlike state, you have to provide reasons, support, backup for what you're saying, reasons, even examples. In speaking, I'd argue that we need better transport. So if someone says that, it's a strong opinion, and then you expect him to explain why he's saying this. And in writing, Many experts argue that exams are outdated, and after that, I'm sure they're going to tell you why. Then we have declare. Declare is when you make or say something publicly, make an official statement, that kind of thing. So when you say something officially, but publicly also, that's the important part. You don't declare to one or two people. Usually you declare to a lot of people. For example, on social media, the government may say it on TV, for example, or something where a lot of people can hear you. For example, lots of celebrities often say, or they declare actually, that they will leave the country if someone wins an election and they don't like the new president. I will leave the country and never come back. Most of them don't do it, of course, but they usually declare it because they put it on social media to all their followers. So it's like a big public statement. They make a big deal of it. So in speaking, he declared that he would never return. It's that kind of thing. He said it to a lot of people. The minister declared a national emergency. This is a politician declaring a national emergency. That means he's talking to the country and telling the country there's an emergency. That's why you say declare a national emergency. Okay, but it also means say, but a different detail, a different specific say. Throughout this video, I will suggest that you look at 5 sentences with the word say, and you change say to one of the words I have just shown you. Sometimes there's only one real obvious verb that you can use, and sometimes you can choose. And when you choose, you're choosing the verb that stresses what you particularly mean. That's the point of them. That's why if you can use the correct verb for say, it stresses more specifically what you want to say. So here are some sentences and you can try it. The scientist said that the results were accurate. He said he'd never been to Canada. My friend said I should apply for the job. So did your friend declare to lots of people? Probably not. The article says that stress affects sleep. She said she disagreed with the decision, so you decide which verbs go there. As I said, and one or two of them could be only one verb. Maybe there's other possibilities for others, but it depends on what you are trying to say. So you can stop the video or you can try rewriting each sentence before moving on, or you can leave it to later and do it then also. If you wish, you can put it in the comments below and I'll have a look. Let's compare a band 5 to a band 7. So band 5 may say, some people say that social media is bad for communication. So when you look at these band 5 examples, you should be able to see other words apart from say that are not so good and maybe you could make better. Now you can see a few in this example, for example. But band 7 might say, some experts argue that social media reduces the quality of face-to-face interaction and leads to greater isolation. They've chosen argue here, and it suggests that they're going to give you reasons. But also look at that second part of the sentence. In band 5 it said, media is bad for communication. That was it, very general, and I'm thinking, what do you mean bad? But in this one, it's more specific, and more specific is good. That social media reduces the quality of face-to-face interaction and leads to greater isolation. So you're much more specific, and the vocabulary is specific, so that's what you want. If we quickly look at a task 2 answer to see if we can use these verbs. Here's part of a part 2 answer, and you can see argue and claim. Both times you could have said say, but of course that's repeating a very basic word. And here you're using 2 different words, but both of these words, argue and claim, they are quite different. They're telling you different details when you use these in a sentence, so that is much better. It's a challenge for you at home. I'm sure many of you have written essays in the past in English. and you could have used the words say or said. So you can look at these old essays, and you can do this with all of the words I show you today in this video. But you can look at the old essays and see how many do you use or have you used. Now, sometimes, depending on you or depending on the language you speak, you use some words more than others. It depends upon you, the individual, often. So some individuals say too much. Others say good too much. Let's have a look at your essays. Have you used it too much? If you have, can you change it to be more specific? And remember, you can use them rewriting using these verbs. So let's move on now to the next word, which was another verb, and it's to make this time. So what's interesting about make is that yes, you can use it a lot and it can be quite general. Sometimes it's good, for example, when you're talking with phrasal verbs or you're trying to use phrasal verbs, and that's better maybe because you're saying make. If you'd use a different preposition, it changes the whole meaning of make. Make up, make out, and something like that. These phrasal verbs mean different things when you use the prepositions and you change them. However, you don't want to use 5 or 6 make phrasal verbs because looks like you're quite limited. You can only use make phrasal verbs. But these are the useful words, and mostly for speaking. I'm going to look at other phrases and other uses of make when I talk about it. So let's go and have a look at 5 possible alternatives to make. So as you see, you've got make all the way down here. But these verbs, again, like the previous words, they tell you more specific meanings than make, and this is what we want. Instead of make a decision, we can say reach a decision. Make money becomes earn money. Make a change, to implement a change. Implement's a good verb for IELTS, particularly in the writing. Make progress, achieve progress, and make a mistake, commit a mistake. Right. Maybe you've heard of quite a lot of these verbs. What's the difference in meaning? You can see briefly there. We're going to have a look now. So the first one, we said we were going to change to make a decision to reach a decision. What's the difference here? Well, the difference is reach is more specific. Reach suggests, first of all, it is a bit more formal. But also, if you reach a decision, it suggests that you've come to a decision after some time, after it's a result of a thought process. So, for example, if you reach a decision, it means that you were thinking for some time and then you decided. Or perhaps at work, you have to discuss something with your team or a group of other people. So you cannot decide immediately. You have to discuss it first, and that is a process that takes some time. So that's reach a decision. If I hear reach, that's what I think you mean. Speaking, for example, I finally reached a decision about my major. So this time they not only said reached, but they said finally as well, telling you that it did take some time. I finally reached a decision about my major suggests it was a long time. I had to think about this before I decided. In the writing, the committee reached a decision after careful discussion. So if you see the verb reached, then you know they didn't decide immediately, they took some time. Next expression was to make money. So we obviously know the verb earn. So why say earn instead of make? Well, earn money suggests that you put some effort into it, that probably you had to work for it, and it resulted in some kind of income. So I earn money by tutoring part-time. So you had to put effort into it by working, and then you got some income out of it. And in writing, many people earn money through freelance work nowadays. Again, it's that combination. You have to put effort in, you work, and you get some income. If you hear the verb earn instead of make, it's stressing what you had to do to get this money. To make a change, What's the difference now? Well, we want to change it to implement, which I said is a good formal word to use, particularly in your writing. So to implement a change means it's formal, but it also suggests that you didn't just change something, you took action to do it. So some people say, yes, we made a change. And then you think, have they actually done it yet? Have they done it? And they say they've made a change. Maybe it's just on paper. But if you implement a change, you're taking action as well. For example, they implemented changes in the daily schedule. So we not only made the change, we did it, is what they're saying. And the school implemented changes to improve student performance. They didn't just change it on paper, for example, or they didn't just say it, they did it. And that's implement a change. Then we'll go to make progress. What's the difference this time? They're all little different versions of make. So to that, we would say achieve progress. If you hear make and if you hear achieve, what's the difference? Achieve usually is when you get some kind of target. You get to a target that you can measure. So you want to get to a certain situation. If you achieve progress to that situation, that means you got there, really. You want to get there. Example, I have achieved some progress with my writing recently. So some progress suggests that they had a target. They're not fully there. They've made some already. They're halfway there. So they've achieved something already. The country has achieved significant progress in healthcare. So they had a target for their healthcare and they've got there already. Maybe now they want another target. Everyone's favourite is to make a mistake, of course. If you say commit, that really sounds serious. So when else do you use that verb commit? Probably most commonly it's to commit a crime, and crimes are usually serious. So you have a very serious tone if you use this verb. So I committed a big mistake during the interview. If you committed a big mistake, not just made, but committed, it suggests it was a very serious mistake. If it was a job interview and you committed a mistake, probably you're not going to get the job. And then he committed a serious mistake by ignoring the warning sign. So there's lots of words here that tells you it's serious. Apart from committed, you have serious. And then warning signs suggest that this kind of mistake could be a real problem. If you notice, again, in the speaking example, I committed a big mistake. You want to look at that sentence and think, could I say better than big? And always think this way because it helps you start to get the better words in there. Anyway, that's how to make. As before, you can look at these sentences and you decide what verb would be better for the sentences. Be more specific for the sentences than the general make. The company made a lot of changes last year. Think about that one, changes. What did we say? I made a mistake during the test. We made a decision to move abroad. So do you decide immediately? She made progress in her English class. And he made money selling used books online. And I think these ones are very clearly specific words you need to use because they're all connected to certain other words in these examples. So as before, you can pause the video and try, or do it later and see what you can come up with. Let's compare band 5 and 7. So the band 5, I made a decision to study abroad and made progress in speaking English. So that's two of the same verb in one sentence, not just in a paragraph. That's not good. Immediately you're thinking, well, the student knows the verb to make. Well done. So you need to show that you know much better than this, but also you are flexible. You can show precision in what you want to say. So does band 7 do anything like this? I reached the decision to study overseas and soon achieved noticeable progress in my spoken English. So I reached the decision. What does that mean again? What are they telling you when they say that? It took some time. They didn't just immediately decide to study abroad. It took some time. And soon achieved noticeable progress. Maybe they didn't get to full target, but they definitely achieved some of that progress already. So they've got some of it already. So looking at the task 2, then we have several words that could be make, but we do much better than that. We use some of the words here. First of all, I've highlighted the use of the verb to argue. That was from earlier, just to say. But now, of course, that was argue. We've got implement, we've got reach. So the benefits will eventually reach the wider population. You see the word eventually. So it's stressing that it's going to take some time. Then we have achieve, and we've got earn. And what are they earning? Their livelihood, which is basically money, their income, I suppose. The idea is, of course, to replace make with these band 7 verbs, giving yourself more flexibility and more range. So instead of, we could use reach a decision, earn their livelihood, implement tax breaks, achieve economic independence, or commit a mistake. So these are 5 more precise verbs. Moving on, what's the next word? The next word is help. So it's another verb. This time, instead of saying help 5 times, we have 5 different words. The one word that I see quite often is aid, so I avoided that one. That means help in some way. So instead of the verb to help, we could say assist, support, facilitate, promote, or contribute to. And these are all pretty good ones, actually, especially good, I should say. So here is to assist. Now, you've heard of the noun describing a person as an assistant. That's a person who helps. For example, a teaching assistant is a person who helps the teacher, for example, and it's a help. When you assist, you're giving practical or technical support to someone. When speaking, I assisted my friend with his project last term, so it's a formal way of saying you helped your friend with his project. Perhaps suggests you have some technical knowledge that your friend didn't. In writing, nurses assist doctors in emergency situations. So probably doctors know the most and they're in charge, but the nurse knows a lot too and they help and assist. Another way of saying help is to support somebody, either financially or emotionally. Usually this is it. You're giving them encouragement or backing emotionally or financially. Giving them money or helping them emotionally. For example, my parents support me emotionally and financially. Of course, the parent supports them with money, but also the parent could support them with, for example, advice. In writing, you could say the program supports students from disadvantaged backgrounds. So perhaps for, a student doesn't have a lot of money, this program can still help them for maybe go to university, for example, something like that. To facilitate, so you may have heard this word before. What's the difference? What kind of help are we talking about with facilitate? Facilitate means to make something easier to do. And some people have jobs, and you can call people facilitators because they're the person who helps make the job easy to do for someone doing it. Or smoother, perhaps, is another way of saying it. So sometimes processes are difficult here, but you can facilitate the process. For example, smartphones facilitate communication between friends abroad. It used to be quite difficult for friends to communicate if they're living abroad apart from one another. Now it's made much easier by using smartphones. The internet facilitates access to online education, so it makes it quite easy now to get online education, whereas before it used to be rather difficult. Then we have promote, so it means help. What kind of help this time? Because you've heard of the words promotion or promotional material. It's like advertising, for example. It's that kind of help. So if you promote something, you encourage or raise awareness of something. You can promote products, you can promote ideas. In speaking, you could say, I think walking every day promotes, that means encourages, a healthy lifestyle. Writing, exercise promotes mental health and physical well-being. So it encourages it, even raises awareness of it for yourself, maybe for others. And then we have contribute to. So what's the difference again? They all mean help, but they have these specific differences when you use them. So what's the difference here? To contribute to, you've had other ones like promote, very different from promote. All right, let's have a look. So if you contribute to something, it means you're part of something bigger that causes a result. So, for example, a good example is recycling contributes to a cleaner neighborhood. So you use the verb to contribute because it's only part of what makes a cleaner neighborhood, but it's an important part. So it plays one part of something larger that causes a result. Recycling is one of the things you can do to keep the neighborhood clean. And writing, urban gardens contribute to improved air quality. So if you have urban gardens, it's going to help improve the air. Won't completely improve the air. You need other things also, but it's a part of it. Again, if you wish to pause and practice, you can replace the verb to help this time. Let's move me. So, education helps people find better jobs. Which word would be more specific? Yoga helps reduce stress. Again, which one would you use to make it specific? She helped me with my homework. This tool helps us complete tasks faster. Regular sleep helps your immune system. All right, so I've given you 5 different verbs you could possibly use to be more specific in these sentences. So you choose them. As I said, you can pause the video now, try it later, up to you. So now let's look at Band 5 and Band 7 comparison. 5 may say, social media helps people stay connected with one another. How about a Band 7? Possibly they would say social media facilitates communication and supports long-distance relationship. So this time they use 2 different words for help, and it's fine, it's good actually, because you're showing the difference in these 2 words and you've shown it in one sentence, so you've been specific with your help verbs. If you wish, you can have a quick look at the task 2, or part of a task 2. And this time we say promote critical thinking, for example, facilitate, make it easier for long-term economic growth, and we've got support disadvantaged communities. So they give possibly financial backing to disadvantaged communities. So let's take a quick break for the moment, and if you like this video, please like and subscribe below. And in the comments section, why not let me know where you're watching this from? Which country are you watching this from? And if you have any requests for videos, for example, particularly about speaking and writing, you can leave them in the comments below also. And of course there are speaking and writing courses of mine available. The links are below and you could click on them and have a look if you're interested. Okay, let's move on now to the next word, which is problem. And it's one of those words that you say a lot, obviously, but when you write it down, you see it all over the writing and you immediately think, too many problems. But let's look at Band 7 alternatives to problems. So, as usual, I'll give you 5 words, and they're all a little bit more specific kinds of problems we're talking about. And so instead of saying problem 5 times, we could say issue, challenge, obstacle, dilemma, and complication. So do you know the differences before I tell you? Anyway, okay, let's look at issue first. So issue has 1 or 2 meanings, and the first one is one, I don't know if it's useful for you in IELTS, but it's useful if you're thinking of talking to people from Britain or going to Britain. It's a word that's often used today instead of the word problem. Why? Because in Britain, the word problem is regarded as too negative. Therefore, they try to make the word milder, and making it milder means you use the word issue because they don't like to think problems are negative. So it's often used as a mild word that means problem. And it's particularly used in formal situations like at work or at university, for example. They may ask you, have you got any issues? It really means problem, but they don't like the negativity of it. But the other possible meaning, and more appropriate for your IELTS, is when issue means a general topic of concern, something that a lot of people are concerned about, and they're probably talking about it. It could be in the country as a whole, or it could be on in the media, for example, the social media in particular. People are talking about this issue, which is a problem, but it's one that's major and under discussion with a lot of people. For example, I think housing is a big issue in my city. People living in this city are all talking about this issue because it affects them and they're worried about it. And another example would be crime is a major issue facing the UK. All right, so they don't like to say it's a problem. You don't want to be negative about crime, so you say it's an issue instead. And of course, issue means that lots and lots of people are talking about this problem of crime, and that's why you can also use the word issue, but don't say it's a problem. All right, so then we move on to challenge, and it comes a little bit from the same mentality where you don't want to say problem because, oh, that's negative. So if you say challenge, it's more positive meaning in the sense that, yes, it could be difficult, but we can overcome this problem. So it's not the end. That's the idea of the word challenge. So it's a difficult task or it's an obstacle, but if we try hard, we will succeed with it anyway. Okay, so not such a big problem. For example, one of my biggest challenges was passing the driving test. So yes, it's a problem, but it's one that you can overcome or defeat, if you like, and you can still succeed. So it's not a problem that ends everything. And in writing, you may say many young people face the challenge of finding stable employment. So again, if you say challenge, you mean that, yes, it's going to be difficult, but it's not impossible to find stable employment, not for some people. And then we have the word obstacles. So that also means problem, but more specifically. So that's something that's in your way. So you're traveling forward, and then suddenly there's something in your way that's stopping you. It's blocking your progress. So that's an obstacle, something that blocks progress or development. And often money is the main obstacle when you're talking in IELTS or you're doing the writing. So money was a big obstacle when I wanted to study abroad. It looked like you were going abroad, you were making progress towards that goal, and then you realized it costs a lot more money than you thought. So money became an obstacle. In the writing, lack of funding remains a key obstacle to innovation. So lack of funding, of course, is the same topic. It's money. Lack of funding is a nice formal phrase, and it means that it's the money problem again. It's an obstacle. The fact that you want to innovate more to make more progress, but you cannot because there's something in the way, and it's lack of money. It's having not enough money, basically. So that's an obstacle. And again, with obstacles, it's suggested that you have to find your way around or over the obstacle, perhaps. And then it's not impossible, but it is difficult. A dilemma. What's the difference? What different kind of problem is a dilemma? Well, from the picture you can see two things, and the young woman is thinking about them. And that's really what it's about, a difficult choice between two or more options. So perhaps you have two or three options and you must decide on only one of them. That's a dilemma. That's a problem. You have to choose between a few options and you can only choose one, for example. So I was in a dilemma about choosing between two job offers. So this lucky person has been offered two jobs. Maybe, for example, one is something that she would love to do and it might make her very happy, but not much money. And the other, maybe not so happy, but a lot of money. Which one do you choose? For some, there's no dilemma. For others, there is. You have to decide which one you want to choose. Again, in writing, governments face a dilemma between protecting jobs and reducing costs. So there's two choices this time, and perhaps they can only choose the one. Which one are they going for, right? So that's a dilemma. And complication. Now, what kind of problem is a complication? A complication is a secondary problem, a problem on top of another problem. A secondary difficulty that makes a situation worse. So you've got one difficulty and you think, okay, I'll handle this, I'll deal with this, and then whoops, here comes another one on top. So that's a secondary difficulty. That's a complication. The second one is a complication. It's often used in official matters and health. Speaking, there was a complication with my visa that caused a delay. All right, so you had a problem. It's usually a little bit difficult getting a visa for anywhere, but you think you've done everything you needed to do, and then there's another problem that comes along on top of this, and that's the complication that causes a little bit more delay. And then we have writing. The surgery was delayed due to an unexpected complication. It's very commonly used in health and surgery like this, for example. So you're going for surgery in the hospital to solve a problem, and they're about to do it, but they find another problem on top of that, and that's a complication. So they have to stop and think about how to handle both. All right, so as before, quickly you can have a look at the word problem in these sentences. Now, as before, can you use more than one, or are they very specifically requiring the specific word that we've looked at already? The first one, there is a serious problem with overcrowded cities. So what do you think? She had a problem deciding which course to take. So it sounds like a choice between one or two. One major problem is the lack of clean water. So which one? The biggest problem I had was learning English idioms. Okay. And the traffic is a growing problem in many urban areas. Think of the situation, look at these explanations, definitions that I gave you a moment ago with the examples, and can you suggest which particular problem goes with which sentence? Is there only one or more than one? You can have a go by pausing as before or waiting till after the video. All right, so let's compare Band 5 and Band 7 quickly. So a Band 5, one of the biggest problems in education is lack of funding. A good expression, as I said, lack of funding. So how do you say that for Band 7? Well, this time we have two words for problem, issues and challenge. So this time you can say it twice if you use different words, and therefore it's not repetition, and in fact you're showing range and flexibility, as we said. So one of the most pressing issues, good expression, pressing issues in education is the challenge of delivering quality teaching with limited resources. So pressing issue means it's quite immediate. You have to deal with it now. You cannot wait too long. It's a pressing issue and needs attention. And quickly, can we spot them in this part of a task 2? Okay, so we've got challenges here, then we go to issue, complication, and obstacles. So that's at least 4. And if you notice, this expression again is a good one. Unique set of challenges. Unique set of challenges. That's like a small collection of similar challenges that are connected in some way. But it's a good expression again and quite formal. A unique set of challenges. We could have said problem 4 times. We didn't. We used 4 different words, and these words were quite specific, which is good. All right, so I said at the start of the video, the number 10 word was one of those words that's really annoying for the examiner and is quite difficult for the student to replace or rephrase. It's a word that is annoying because it's there all the time, particularly in writing. You see it a great deal. Repeat, repeat, repeat. And so it's difficult to avoid it, but it's not good if you see it too often. And of course, that word is people. All right, so the use of the word people, especially in writing, because it really shows lack of flexibility. You see a lot of people, and think of something else, please. It's a very general word anyway. You want to do a little bit better. Now, how do we do that, though? It's difficult. All right, so I would note before we look at alternative words, I do like it when students try to avoid using the word people altogether. And that means avoiding the word people or synonyms. And how do you do that? Well, you can do it with different grammatical structures. So I've actually made a video on my channel about this very topic. And the first possibility for avoiding saying people altogether is by using the passive voice. In this example here, instead of people often claim, you could write, it is often claimed that. Therefore, you don't use the word people. And why? Because people is often the subject of a sentence. Not always, but often. And when it is, you can change it round to passive. And the word people's not so important to use then. You don't really need to say by people. So you can take it away. So this is a good way of avoiding it sometimes, and it's formal grammar that looks good, passive voice. Or you could try another way. In the video on my channel, you can also find this. It's better not to say the word at all, as I say. So for example, there are people who think could become, there are those who think, and you don't need to say the word people or a synonym. There are those who think. Let's have a look at some people words. So here we go. There's a lot of them here, but they're all quite specific. And this can be a problem because you don't want to misuse one of these in the wrong situation. Anyway, we have individuals, the public, citizens, residents, consumers, the population, households, communities, younger, older generations, and professionals, employees, and workers, and they're all specific to certain topics. Let's look at the word individuals first. It's quite a formal word, so it can be useful. Yes, it is formal, and it's quite neutral, and it's like persons, individual people. It's often used for essays, reports, or an academic tone, etc. And yes, you could use it writing task 1 or 2 in this one. For example, many individuals prefer working from home. You could say many people, but actually if you say many individuals, this stresses each person. And governments should encourage individuals to recycle. So if you say people, it's basically quite general. Everybody. Encourage individuals suggests that each individual person should be encouraged. However, you look at the public can be used instead of people, but the public suggests a collection of people in general or society as a whole. So you've heard of the general public. So the public basically are everyone in society. So it's not one every person, it's general everyone in society. For example, the government must protect the public from criminals, right? That's their job, and if they don't do that, they're not doing the job. But what does it mean? You protect everyone in society from criminals. Museums should be freely accessible to the public. Everyone in society should be able to go to museums for free. Then we move to citizens. Often this is a little confusing because it sounds like it's meant to be just for cities. But citizens usually refer to the people of a country who belong to a country, and that means who are legally part of the country, put it that way. So that's a citizen. They have the legal right to be part of the country. And again, when do you use it? Now, it's a little bit more specific because you're talking about your rights, responsibility, or government topics in general. Then you talk about the citizens. That's the legal residents of the city. So all citizens should have equal access to education. Everyone who's legally belongs to a country should have access to the same education. And the policy failed to benefit ordinary citizens. Ordinary always sounds a negative word to me when you talk about citizens, but we'll accept it. The policy failed to benefit ordinary citizens. That means the regular people who are legally part of the country. That's a citizen. Now, what's the difference between a resident and a citizen? A resident are the people who live in a specific area. So that could be a specific city, a little town, a village, maybe part, an area of the city. Local issues, if you're talking about those, you often talk about local residents. Housing is a good topic for that. Transport, a lot of topics to do with these situations. So, for example, urban residents suffer from overcrowded public transport. Noise pollution affects residents living near airports. So in that area near the airport, there's a lot of noise for the people who live there. So it's people who live in a particular place. Then we have consumers. So you hear this word a lot nowadays in advertising and in business. And it's people who buy stuff or buy products or shop, for example, online or off. Businesses, economics and advertising usually refer to people as consumers, shoppers, if you like. So modern consumers expect fast delivery and convenience. If the sentence said modern people, it's something different from modern consumers. So modern people means basically everybody expects fast delivery. This is specifically talking about people who buy stuff expect fast delivery. So again, you're getting the specific word for the situation there. Consumers are becoming more environmentally conscious. Imagine you just said people. People are becoming more environmentally conscious. That's a little different from saying consumers. So this one suggests that the people who buy stuff perhaps are thinking about the environment when they buy the thing. The population is another collection of people, and this time it's everybody in the country, and sometimes you also talk about everyone in a particular big region of the country. If you live in a big country in particular, you have quite big regions there. And often it refers to statistics, demographics, trends, and you see a lot of that in writing task 1, for example. You know, the trends in the graphs and things like that. And sometimes you do see the word a lot written by students. So then this is where you can say people, you can say population. You're thinking, what else can I use? You know, a large proportion of the population is aging. So a large amount of the people living in this country, for example, are getting older. Aren't we all? The population has grown rapidly in the past decade, so possibly you're talking about a specific country and how the population has gone up. Maybe it's come down, but the population are all the people in that particular place. This one's an interesting one. Households. What could that refer to exactly when you're using the word? Well, it's used often to describe families who live together under the same roof in the same house. But it doesn't need to necessarily be families, people who live together in the same house, for example. That's usually referred to in topics to do with economics, perhaps energy use and spending, How much does each household spend? So that's each family unit or people living together. Examples, many households struggle with rising living costs. So they're suggesting that families or people who live together really find the cost of living a bit too high. Energy efficient appliances can help households save money. So again, it can help people who live together and families save a lot of money. So it's quite a good one, households instead of families. And then we have communities. Often it refers to groups of people who live in the same location, the same specific location. So perhaps a small village, you'd call that a community, or a smaller area where people live in a city, that could be a community. But also it refers to people who are connected by interests. So, for example, online communities, people who don't live anywhere near each other, but they all share the same interest. That can be a community also, and they get together online, for example. So you use this expression for people when you're talking about social issues, culture, perhaps also. It's groups of people who share some kind of identity due to interests or be living closely next to each other. Examples, local communities should be involved in decision making, right? If you want to decide things for a particular area or village, then you should ask the people who are all living there, they're all connected. Strong communities improve social well-being. So obviously, if you're all living next to each other and you get along well and you know each other, this is good for social well-being. And it could possibly be also for other communities that share interests online. You have people to talk to and you're connected to. And this one's a little obvious. Often, particularly in the speaking test, you're asked questions about what's different between the young people of today and the people who are older from the past. Are they the same or are they different? And you have to talk about them, and you don't want to say people all the time. Perhaps you could say the elderly and youths, for example, or you could say younger and older generations. And that's when you're talking about specific age groups, the young and the old, basically. And this can be many topics, especially in the speaking. You often find in part 3 of the speaking test that the examiner may ask you, oh, right, is it the same for young people and the same for old people? Or was it the same 20 years ago, for example? And therefore, you may have to talk about younger and older generations. So younger generations rely heavily on technology, kind of a stereotype, as is this one. Older generations often value traditional lifestyles. Right, so that's a very standard way of showing the difference between the two. And finally, you have when people work together. They could be talked about as professionals, employees, or workers. And here we are, it's specific groups within the workforce. So groups that work together, and specific groups. So you could have a lot of employees, maybe there's a few workers and professionals. They describe a group of people working in a business or a factory or anywhere else. And usually you use these terms when you're talking about employment, economics, or education. Example, here's professionals. Professionals require continuous training to stay competitive. So they could say people, but this is making a specific point about professionals. You expect professionals know enough already, but what they're saying is they still need to keep being trained to keep up with modern times, for example, and to be competitive. Many workers are demanding better work-life balance. So this time, a little more general, because it doesn't matter. You could be an employee or a professional, maybe even an employer, and you all work and you all need to get that work-life balance. And I should point out that sometimes students think a good replacement or synonym for the word people is human beings, and I would avoid saying human beings. Often you see this in writing task 2. A student keeps saying human beings and they think this replaces people. But it looks very strange. And why is it strange? Because if you talk about human beings, it suggests that perhaps you are not a human being. You're from outer space up there, or an alien of some kind, because it's something that suggests you're looking at human beings and you're not. So I would avoid using that expression as a synonym or a replacement for the word people. Now, here are the sentences again to be rewritten if you wish. Before I read them, I look at this and immediately, not reading this, but immediately the word people jumps out. And this is what happens when I read, or before an examiner or marker reads your paper. They lift the paper up and some words jump off the page because he notices them instantly. And one of these words is people. So I lift the paper at task 2 and I see people, 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 and I think, oh no, because I immediately think this is very limited vocabulary, very repetitive of general, vague words, not going to be a good mark. So before you even read the essay, that vocabulary is going to be a problem. So you don't want them to look at it like that. If they look and they don't see any repeated word jump out, this is a good sign. Anyway, here they are. So you decide, do you need one word here, or can you choose to stress one rather than the other? So number 1, people are becoming more interested in healthy eating. Many people believe governments should support the arts. People who live in cities face high living costs. Young people spend too much time online, and people want better public transport. Can we have a look as before? Decide if you want to pause the video or do it later and see what you can come up with. All right, so just to summarize these people words, because as I said at the beginning, they are quite specific for particular topics, if you like. So let's have a look just to have a quick overview. There's particular groups. So if you're talking about society as a whole, you usually talk about the public. If you're talking about a country, you can say citizens or the population. So that's 2. If you're talking about a city, you don't say citizens, you say residents, people who live in that particular place. If you talk about buyers or shoppers, you can say consumers. The interesting one was families. You can often use families in particular situations. Instead of families, you should say households. Social groups are referred to as communities. So these 2, I think, households and communities, are interesting ones. If you're talking about workers, you say employees or professionals. Again, students and age groups, in particular, younger, older generation, it helps, but it's not perfect, I think, that one. General formal words include the word individuals, but not human beings. All right, so that was it. But these were 5 more basic words that if you want to score above 6, for example, you want to start to not use these words and use better words. And I've suggested some better words. And why? Because, first of all, they're more precise. They stress or they give detail with one word instead of being general and vague. And that's the big difference to get to the 7 and above. You're not general, you're a bit more specific and precise with your words. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, of course, please like and subscribe below, and I'll see you next time.